Pretty good about this.
Deadlines
You
to
can do
me.
it. Bosses, colleagues, and clients.
Staff.
I should exercise.
There are projects
and
to
all
me.
these things
I
you're
should
trying to
eat 8 hours
manage.
and
She's
she's
just
pregnant.
compatible.
I can do all this.
Dance
All these
and
things
cry.
I'm trying to do, and it's just getting a little bit crazy.
How might I simplify?
All right, how we doing? You guys caught me. I wasn't quite ready. My stand fell apart. I was just walking up here. All right, I think that's good. What's happening, Gateway? You ready? I've been excited about this series, Simplify, largely because I need it. Just by way of example, I got a text from my wife this morning. I came in early and she was at home 2 days ago. Two days ago, she pulls in our garage after going to Costco, a van full of stuff. We empty it out, and since that, this is Friday, we haven't been able to find her keys. And the only keys we have for this car. So our car, our beloved minivan, is stuck in our garage. I'm thinking, now's my chance, right? We can just cart it off and be done with it. But no, we search high and low for our keys. We literally go through our garbage piece by piece. Wasn't in the garbage. We go through piles of clothes. Wasn't in the clothes. We go through the van, but like as much as we can. Wasn't in the van. Wasn't in any of those places because it was in the key box. The key box, where we put our keys, that's where the one place we didn't look is the key box, because we don't have time to use the key box. It's this box by our door. When we go in, we're supposed to put our keys there, but we never do because we're busy, right? You just throw them someplace. So we didn't think to actually look where they're supposed to be. So anyway, this struck me as a little bit ironic as I'm talking about Simplify. Evidently, I need this series. That song, I Just Want to Be Okay. It's kind of a lighthearted song. If you think about the lyrics, it's actually quite profound and kind of thought-provoking. I just want to be okay. I just want to feel today. I just want to know today. You and I, we go through life kind of clamoring and clanging through life, and you look at it, you go, you know what I want? I just want to be okay. I want to be at peace. I want the world to be at peace. I want my kids to be at peace. I just want to be okay, right? We have that kind of that longing within us, and life just kind of takes off and it accelerates. Life would be a whole lot easier if there were just one thing to think about. You just had one responsibility. This right here, this is the only thing I need to think about. But life is far more multidimensional than that. And that's good because we like the complexity of life to a certain degree, but it sure doesn't make living life easy. Now, you have your work, whatever you do with the lion's share of your day. Your work might be to be a student. Your work might be to work in a company. Your work might be to be a stay-at-home parent, whatever it is. Even that one thing that you do with the lion's share of your day isn't just one thing. Because within your work, there are multiple clients that need to be pleased, right? And there's your boss that has various projects that he or she is throwing at you. There's just all sorts of things that come at you in your work life. Then you cross that bridge into your private life, your personal life. Again, your personal life, it's not just one thing. There's that broken relationship that weighs on you. There's that desire to get in shape and get that treadmill going. That's just like a clothes hanger right now. Get that going again, or use that $200 program, that DVD set you bought to get in shape that you don't use anymore after the first day of it. Those kinds of things. They weigh on you. Then there's the area that kind of touches both work life and personal life. I'll call it communication. Email, all right? You got your home email and your work email, and you got Facebook, and you got Instagram, and my favorite, Snapchat. You got all these things going on, right? Then I dare you, in the midst of all this, I dare you to go to church, right? Because this is what you look like when you walk into church. I see it in your eyes, right? And then that guy who's up front, he starts talking about, you need to get involved. You need to get connected, right? You need to serve. You need to make a difference in the world. And you're like, yeah, I'll do that, right? I don't know how. I'll kind of grab another one over here. And this is what you look like when you leave church. You got another one that you're holding on to, right? How in the world do you do all this? We just wrapped up this series, Imagine Heaven. I'm like, look at this is Imagine Hell right here, okay? That's what this is. This is what my life looks like, all right? How am I supposed to do this? It is interesting, though, in this Imagine Heaven series. I don't know how it impacted you, but I thought, when I do stand before God one day, I know it's not going to be all these accomplishments and all these things that I'm trying to do and all these tasks I'm trying to clear out, all these emails I'm trying to purge out of my inbox. It's not going to be about that. It's going to be about how I loved and how I cared for people and how I looked out for people. That's what it's about. I know that instinctively, I know that. And yet it's terribly hard to live that way. In my own life, I'll tell you how this plays out. I've got the world's greatest son named Chase. Great kid. Love him to death. And yeah, you can holler for that. And I'll get home from work, and he's into tennis these days. And I played tennis growing up, and so we play tennis together. And I'll walk in the door, and this is what I look like. He can't see this, but this is what I look like. And say, Dad, you want to go play tennis? And I'm thinking, I want to go play tennis. Like, that's the dad I want to be. But, Chase, this is what I'm holding on. I got all this stuff. I don't know if I can do that tonight. Several years ago, it was in the evening, and my daughter, she says to me, hey, Dad, will you take me to go get ice cream? And I'm thinking, that's the dad I want. I want to be the ice cream dad, right? Like, I want to go do it. Like, let's do that. But I look at her, and she couldn't see all this, but I'm like, I've just got too much tonight, Ellie. I can't. I kid you not, this is what she says. She says, Dad, in a few years, I'll have a boyfriend. He'll take me to ice cream. I won't need you anymore. Look at this photo coming up on the screen. There's a photo of us. That's us at ice cream the very night. Very, very smart girl, okay? She knows how this works. How do we simplify? I mean, truly, how do we simplify, and how can we be about what truly matters? Because I want to be about what truly matters. Now, my initial inclination was to lead us through a series where it would be about decluttering our lives externally, kind of a less is more series. And no doubt that theme, you'll feel that theme in this series. That will come up. But there is a problem with that. A very real problem. I've dubbed it the Craxton problem, okay? As I was reflecting on this idea of less is more and getting rid of responsibilities in our lives, I got thinking about you all and got thinking about my friends Chris and Karen Craxton, who are part of Gateway, wonderful people. About a year ago, Karen gave birth to twin boys. This is in addition to her 2 young girls. So when they had their twins, they had 4 kids under the age of 5, 2 of whom were infants, all right? Now, if the main theme of this series is you need to get rid of some of these responsibilities, right? Karen to go, which one do I pawn off? Like how do I do that? I'm fairly confident. I actually asked her. I'm fairly confident she does not want to do that. So I had this filter in this series. What will work for Karen? And what works for those of you who have busy and demanding jobs that you both need to keep and want to keep because you're doing exactly what you should be doing? And what works for those who, in addition to our jobs and our friendships and our families, we feel both called and compelled to make a difference in this world. We do want to get involved. We do want to make a difference. What's it going to take to live that way? The reality is this is not a new problem. I read a quote recently describing 1903. Okay, not 2003, 1903, right around the last time the Cubs won the World Series, okay? So this is a long time ago. She says this, in response to the stunning increase in nervous disorders diagnosed around the turn of the century, commentators and clinicians cited a number of factors related to the stress of modern civilization of 1903. The increased speed of communication facilitated by the telegraph and railroad, the unmelodious clamor of city life, and the rise of tabloid press that exploded local horrors into national news. I can hear my great-grandparents now. I got 2 telegraphs last month. I mean, it's wearing me out, all this information, right? It's just way, way too much. So, it's not about what's going on externally. It is about that, but there's more to it than that. There's something that goes on within us. So, we need to look at this from a couple of different perspectives. I've got 2 words for you. The first actually is perspective. We're going to be talking about what is the perspective that we carry through life when it comes to all that's going on, okay? What's the perspective? Second is, what practices? Now, practice. What practices do I engage? What do I actually do to simplify my life? I want to know the perspective I need to carry, and I want to know what practices I can engage. Now, I've got a specific passage of Scripture to take us to. We'll likely refer to it throughout the series a few times. But to grasp the full weight of this passage, we need to consider two people. I call them Jim and Jane, okay? Jim and Jane work for the same company. They even have the same job. They're in sales. Interesting thing about Jim and Jane, Jim works 60 hours a week. Jane works just 40 hours a week. Jim sees how hard he's working compared to how little Jane is working, and he's convinced that he's going to blow past her on the corporate ladder, so to speak. She's barely working, he says. I never see her here on a Saturday. There comes a day, though, when both Jim and Jane are informed that they will be meeting with the owner of the company to give kind of an update on how they're doing in their jobs. Jim's very excited about this. He's been looking forward to this moment, and he is just absolutely convinced that he's going to smoke Jane in this meeting, like she's just going to be left in the dust. So he prepares a 20-page PowerPoint presentation so he can inform the owner of his company of all that he's accomplished over the last 12 months. Jane is unaware of Jim's plan. Jane only prepares one sheet of paper. When Jim sees that, he smiles. No PowerPoint, no animation on her slides, no long list of accomplishments. Jim's confidence soars. They get into the meeting. Jim goes first. For 30 minutes, he goes on and on about all he's done. This will position us better in the market. This will position us better against competition. This will make us more efficient. Jim stops, turns it over to Jane. Jane hands the owner one sheet of paper and says, "These are the 17 new clients I've acquired over the last 12 months. They're listed in order of the revenue that they bring you." So Jim is asked, "Do you have one of those?" He doesn't. And you can guess who excels in the company versus who leaves the company, right? Jim has a problem, and I have a word for it. It's very simple. Jim's problem is arrogance. Jim thought he knew better than anyone else what was needed for the company, and his arrogance kept him from focusing on the one thing that truly mattered, the one thing that he was actually hired to do. I want to give you a perspective that I'm bringing to this that I hope you can kind of join me on. Hear this very carefully. It's my hope, actually, that this perspective kind of bothers you a little bit. Because if it bothers you a little bit, then I know that you're getting it, okay? I want to know what it is that matters to the owner of the company. That's it. I want to know what matters to the owner of the company. I'm not interested in my agenda for life or your agenda for life. I'm interested in God's agenda for life. Because if I can know what it is that He wants for His company, that He created and He owns, if I can know that, then I can simplify my life around that. It can be very simple. If, on the other hand, I have my own agenda, my own things that I want, well, then there may be a problem. So, with that in mind, I want you to hear how our passage opens today. It's from Micah chapter 6. And real clearly, Micah opens with this question: with what shall I come before the Lord? With what shall I come before the Lord? Another way, or put another way, what kind of report should I prepare for the owner of the company? What kind of report would the owner want to see? How should I prepare to meet him? Now, my suspicion is that some of us are thinking something to the effect of, I'm not sure I want to base my life on what somebody else wants for my life, even if that somebody else is God. That's good. Lean into that if you're recognizing that. Because that right there is a watershed thought in your life. Whose agenda do I want to live by? Am I really interested in what God has for me? Here's a critical question. If you get nothing else out of this today, nothing out of this series, here, answer this question. Do I want what God wants for my life? Do I want what God wants for my life? Do I believe God has good things for my life? If I were to stand before God, He were to tell me what He wanted for my life, would I be pleased with what He has to say? That right there is a critical question, especially if we're talking about simplification. Truth is, most of us think like Jim. We know what's best for the company, right? All of our bosses are idiots. We know that, right? We know it's my boss, of course, but that, we know what's best for the company. We know what needs to happen. And although we wouldn't say it like that in reference to God, there's something in us that thinks, I know how to do this. I don't want anyone getting in to my business. Scripture says this, so. Ecclesiastes 5, do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. Be very careful in your approach to God. Let's keep reading. Micah continues, Micah 6. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Kind of cryptic language for us. We don't think about sacrifices and burnt offerings and calves and 10,000 rivers of oil. It's actually quite interesting, though, if you kind of bring it into our day of what kind of the heart of this is. Micah is asking, should I seek to wow God? Should that be my goal? I'm going to impress God. Should it be my goal that God would say, the last guy came in with 1 ram, you came in with 1,000. Wow. Like, is that what God would want, right? Is that what this is about? Now, you and I don't think of sacrificial rams and such, but humanity hasn't changed that much. And there is this little inclination in us that says, should I try to wow God? Should I try to impress him? Micah continues, shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? It's interesting, again, kind of cryptic language, but if you think about it, kind of meditate on it a little bit, he's talking about his guilt. There needs to be some sort of atoning sacrifice for my guilt. Do I need to sacrifice something that I really care about, like my first son? Do I need to sacrifice something that really matters to me to prove that I want to atone for my guilt? Is that what I should do? Now, interesting thing about this passage. I typically don't recommend reading into passages, but I think you'll track with me on this. When you're reading this passage, you can almost hear Micah's original audience saying no. Should I do this? No. Should I do that? No. Like instinctively, they knew that's not what it's about. Now, I mark that because I'm convinced that many of us, maybe all of us, as we blast our way through lives, we have these moments where we're running hard and we have that kind of instinctive thought, like, is this what it's about? And with that original audience of Micah, we say, no, it's not that. That's not the way it's meant to be lived. Something's not quite right. Micah continues, he has told you what is good. God has told you what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? Hear this carefully. What does the boss want? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. I love that. 3 things, he says. I want you to be about justice and kindness. And he wants us to walk humbly with our God. I want to zero in on that idea of walking humbly. What does that mean? Let me tell you where this lit up for me. It lit up when I put it in contrast to what came before it. I'm going to try to impress God perspective. Well, if I'm trying to impress God, who am I focusing on? I'm focusing on me, right? And when I read this, it says, no, that's not how you're to live. You're not trying to wow God. I don't live to wow God. Micah is saying, live to be wowed by God. Don't live to impress God. Live to be impressed by God. We don't go before God and say, hey, look at me. We go before God and say, hey, look at you. Who's big in this room? Am I the big one trying to be impressive, or do I fall on my knees because he is so impressive? There's a different perspective there. Check out this statement made in the New Testament, Acts 17. And he, God, is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. God doesn't need me. God doesn't need any of us. We need God. We get that mixed up sometimes, like God is lucky to have me. Right? No, God's not lucky to have me. I'm lucky to have God. We got to turn that around. Now, you hear this passage from Micah, and you might think, Okay, what does God require of me? Walk humbly. Now, I've been around here long enough at Gateway to know there's something about a cross, right? Something about forgiveness and all. Like, where is that in this deal? How does that fit into this? Well, think about that word humbly. Drill down, go deeply into that word humbly. What do you find? You find a cross when you drill down into that. Because what's it mean when you go, I need the cross? Well, that's a humble act because I need grace. I need forgiveness. Listen to how the cross is described in the New Testament, 1 John. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. It's not what I did for God, it's what God did for me. So we don't go before God with thousands of rams or rivers of oil that Micah first suggested. We don't do that because we aren't the ones who provide the sacrifice. God provides the sacrifice. We humbly accept the sacrifice. Now, my question, though, is, now what? How do I live in light of that? In light of that cross, in light of that humility, what do I do on a day-to-day basis? How do I live? How do I simplify? And does this idea of justice and kindness and humility, does that do anything for me? If humility is the perspective, or 2 P's, if humility is the, what's the practice? Now, I'm going to get highly practical for how we get after dealing with all of life's responsibilities, right? All these sitting up here. When I'm looking at this, like you, I want to knock this life out. I want to do some things. I want to make a difference. I want to really go for it. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to have what I'll call the look at me perspective, right? That I'm talking about here. Wow, look at me. Well, if that's my perspective, I'm going around and I'm doing things and I'm loading them into my basket because I want to impress. I want people to see and I want God to see how effective I am at this life. But there's a challenge with this, a very real challenge. What sort of impact does it have on your life? How does it affect you when you're the one who's having to hold it all together? What does that do for your stress level? What does that do for your joy? What does that do for your ability to act kindly and love justice? What's it do for that in your life? Well, if you're anything like me, quite honestly, those are the kinds of things that are first to go. Why? Because I'm trying to hold it all together. When I'm trying to hold it all together, the last thing I feel like being is kind. I'm irritated, right? And what I want to do is I just want to feel good because I don't feel good with all that stress. And I want to do something that will make me feel good. So I want to drink, right? That's what I want to do. I want to drink heavily. Or, I want to look at something that makes me feel good, right? That's what I want to do. Or no, I'm going to shop it away, right? I'm going to buy some new shoes. That's what it's going to do for me. And those things work for like an hour and a half, okay? And then what happens is when you really try to go through your life, you find that they don't work at all. You're right back where you started, and all those responsibilities are all spread out, and actually maybe worse because you're not as effective because you just feel gross by these various practices and such. Your life is out of control. So how do we do this in a way that is healthy and helpful and truly makes a difference in our lives? The humble take a different approach. Now, I don't do this anywhere near perfectly, but I want to bring you into a snapshot of my life. There are days I do this well, there are other days I don't do this so well. But if my perspective is that I want to look at God, then I'm going to do something in my life. I'm going to have some practices that actually help bring that perspective front and center. Because the reality is when these responsibilities get thrown my way, that perspective, it gets knocked around. Yes, I can say that's my perspective, but one bad day and that's kind of dislodged. So how do I bring that back in? Recently, I had one of those days and was struggling and just frustrated with a number of different categories of my life. I actually broke them into 4 categories. I won't belabor you with the details of them, but there are kind of 4 areas that were stressing me out. And so I got home and I was feeling that way of, kind of all bunched up and tied in knots, and I didn't want to feel that way. And I know that there is one thing I can do where I connect with God best. I kind of the physical and the spiritual intersect for me quite a bit. And so lately I've been mountain biking, and I'm on the mountain bike trail, and I'll talk with God. This happened to be late at night, so I had to go to this elliptical machine that I hate in our extra room at home. But I got on that elliptical machine, and my kids, they thought it was odd because I turned on all the lights, and I'm in there on this elliptical machine, doing my thing. But I had all the lights off for a reason, because I wasn't just doing a physical discipline, I was doing a spiritual discipline. I was on that elliptical machine, but I was actually on my knees. And I was taking these responsibilities one by one, and I was entrusting them to God. Just one by one, talking to God about this one and that one, and going through them. And an interesting thing happened on that 30-minute elliptical ride. I got off it 30 minutes later, and life all of a sudden felt simple again. When I stepped on it, there were responsibilities spread all throughout my life, right? And it was causing me stress, and I didn't want to exercise. I didn't want to pray. I knew that if I could get 5 minutes into it, I'd click over and I'd be okay. So I just had to get through the 5 minutes of misery, and then I'd click over, and I would be happy that I did it. So I did it. And then another thing I found interesting, next day, when I get up and I start having to face these different things, it's a totally different story when they've all been entrusted to God. Because now I can take them out one by one, and I can look at them one by one. I don't have to look at the chaos spread out through all my life. God's holding those. I can trust God with those, and I can look at that one responsibility and deal with that one responsibility because God has the rest of them together. He's holding them for me. Perspective and practice. Like you, there's a great deal of my life that I don't want to eliminate. I like my job, I like my kids, I like the people I work with, I like my wife, I like my friends, the opportunities I have. Each of these come with a degree of hardship, but the answer is not to simplify by getting rid of them. The answer is to simplify by entrusting them. It's a totally different deal. If I can simplify by entrusting them, then I can live in a way where I have focus because I've entrusted them to God, and then I can focus on what's really right. Now here's what's doubly fascinating about this. Again, what Micah say? He has told you what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. When I have done this, when I've entrusted these things to God, guess what comes out of me more readily? Kindness. Guess what I want to be about? I want to be about justice. Because He's holding all of these responsibilities for me now. I am liberated and free where I can go look somebody in the eye and go, what's going on in your life? How are you doing? When I'm holding them all and trying to keep it all together, I'm concerned about me. I can't think about you. I got to think about me. I got to carry all this. I can't do this. A while back, I read a brief story about Ronald Reagan. President Reagan feared flying, kind of an interesting little thing about his life. In 1937, he'd had a bad experience on an airplane, and so for many years he crisscrossed the country by train. Once he became governor and then president, obviously he couldn't do that. That'd be a little odd. If instead of Air Force One, we had like Train One or something going around, that'd be a little weird. So he's flying on a plane, and a fellow passenger commended him for overcoming his phobia, to which Reagan responded, overcome it, I'm holding this plane up by sheer willpower. Now, I love that story because I think a lot of us approach life that way. We don't overcome it. We're just trying to hold it together by sheer willpower. And the captain of the plane is going, you can do nothing for this plane. Let me do this. Let me do my job so you can be freed up and liberated to do your job. Life has its complexities, but when we attempt to hold it all together, the things that we are incapable of holding all together, that's when it's truly out of control. But when we have a perspective that says, I'm going to be humble, I'm going to trust God, and we have practices that reinforce that, something happens powerful in our lives where we can truly simplify.